I
we'll
don't
see.
anticipate Kevin Love will. I don't think Kevin Love will spend a whole lot of time in Salt Lake City.
I would agree. So Jalen Williams put up a 20-minute video on his YouTube channel, which is not that active. I don't think he'd put anything up since the All-Star break. And so I feel like by the time this pod comes out, it'll have more traction. But he basically goes through an explanation of what he went through with that torn ligament in his wrist during the end of the season. He suffered the injury on April 9th, right before the end of the season, when he dove for a loose ball and got tangled up with Devin Booker. And he said he felt like something tear. He could almost hear the tear. And he'd had a sprained ligament in his wrist for a while, and then it tore. And so it was a little bit known that he was dealing with a wrist injury because he would be icing his wrist sometimes during timeouts. But there's a lot of players dealing with injuries during the playoffs, and he was playing every game. And look, he was a little up and down, but it's the playoffs. It's his first deep run into the playoffs. Like, you're expecting guys to be up and down. Like, he definitely got some criticism for his struggles, but the story he told was fascinating about what he went through to stay on the court was pretty remarkable. He said that he was getting shots, pain-killing shots. He said lidocaine shots in his wrist that would, dull the pain before every single game, and including before some practices, because he wanted it to, even to be able to practice it. And he said that he had 28 or 29 pain-killing shots that he took throughout the 4 playoff rounds. And he talked about how some games, depending on how things would go, that the shots would wear off, and he would deal with, basically problems in the fourth quarters of the games because he was having difficulty with it. He talked about how he could barely sleep because his hand would really swell up and be very painful after the games when the shots wore off. He still shot the ball pretty good. His 3-point shooting was the thing that suffered the most. He only shot 30% in the postseason after shooting, I think, let's see, we shot in the regular season. He shot 37% in the regular season. And some of these quotes were pretty good. Let me get some of these here. So he said, my main hand, his shooting hand, it was on his right hand, was just not the same. My jump shots just felt different. He said, I didn't want to tell the world I was hurt. And so the world just ganged up on me about how I wasn't ready for the moment. I'm not sure that the world ganged up on him, but I can certainly see when you're getting criticized, it feels like the world's ganging up on you, which is obviously wrong now. But that was the most annoying thing, because human nature is you just want to scream that you're hurt. But I was able to lock in and use that and not use that as an excuse. And of course, he had several spectacular clutch games. Like MacMahon, he had the 40-point game in Game 6. Game 5, which was basically the turning point game where the Thunder got leverage for down the stretch. He had the 34-point
in the finals.
He had the 34-point game in the Minnesota series in Minnesota in Game 4, where again that series was essentially clinched. They went up 3-1.
Bounced back from a loss with that what was then a career high. But look, he was criticized in the second round, and the context there was that last year in the second round he came up short against the Mavericks, and he sat in that all summer long. And the big question we talked about in the pod: did the Thunder have that second score? And they didn't last year. He wasn't up for that challenge while also taking the second toughest defensive assignment. And then in the second round, he had the worst 3-game shooting stretch of his career. He was 10 of 43, I believe it was, including 3 of 16 in their Game 6 loss. And the people covering the team, we knew there was something going on with the wrist. Yet we didn't know the severity, obviously. We didn't know that there was torn ligaments. It was going to be a surgery right after the season. But you could see in his he wears a big shooting sleeve on that wrist, so you couldn't see the tape job during the game. But when we went through his pregame, I mean, that thing was like heavily taped from wrist all the way basically up to the elbow, the kinetic tape. And he was asked about it after that 3 of 16 and completely downplayed it. Said, hey, something along the lines of everybody's banged up at this time of year. That's not the reason why I'm making or missing shots. But here this guy is playing for a team that, has championship expectations. I mean, best record in the league, best point differential in NBA history. And he's having to figure out not just how to manage the pain, but how to remake his jumper on the fly so he can be that number 2 guy on a team that's trying to win a championship. And never bitching, never moaning, never whining or complaining, never leaking just how severely it was hurt. It's pretty remarkable stuff for a guy who, like you said, the 2 biggest pressure games of the conference finals and then again in the finals, this guy had the best playoff performances of his career.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few people who had their stock raised in the playoffs more than Jalen Williams, both with the way he played in the conference finals and the moments he had to help get over the hump in that Denver series, and now with the way this has come out after. I mean, I was completely enraptured watching this 15-minute video of him talking about all this stuff. It was pretty remarkable to hear him go through it in the detail that he did. You never hear guys talk about stuff like this. And it both shows you the lengths that guys are going to stay on the court in a run like this. I mean, he's talking about having a callus on his wrist from the amount of times he's getting shot up. Like Brian said, it's 28 or 29 times, he said. And you look at the way he played, the way he carried himself, the way he delivered for the Thunder down the stretch. I mean, the combination of him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holmgren, we've talked about it a ton all season long, but those guys together going forward are as good as it gets. And if you're the Thunder, you have to be just thrilled to have that trio together. And he answered every question and then some in this run. And, imagine how good he's going to look next year if he's actually healthy in the playoffs instead of dealing with a wrist injury like this after he had a 40-piece in the finals and did all the stuff he did down the stretch with all this stuff he had going on physically.
As Bontemps was saying, he was talking about how the hardest thing for him mentally and physically was that Denver series. He said that's where it was giving him the most problems. By the time they got to the finals, they had figured out a tape job that was a little bit more useful, as you were talking about, MacMahon. But he just said he had to basically, and I don't love this terminology, but he said he basically had to man through it in that Denver series. And he also kept banging it. I think he had an issue where he got it hit by Aaron Gordon. He was like, listen, he goes, it's absolutely killing me out there. And I am guarding Aaron Gordon and at times having to deal with Nikola Jokic. And he's like, it was a really hard thing. So yeah, that stretch of games.
And then he gets to deal with Julius Randle, and then the treat after that's Pascal Siakam. I mean, come on.
Right. So he said the Denver series was the hardest one that he had to go through, and that was where he's having the most issues with it. And, after the series was over, when Sam Presti did his end of season media, he spoke, very glowingly about Jalen not ever using that as an excuse. And he didn't. That's absolutely true. And so I really appreciated him. Obviously some players are always going to be a little bit careful.